In this video, we will be going through the process of how I made this silver filigree ring. I will also be telling you how to obtain your own zigzag jig. This ring might look hard to make, but it's really not. I will be making a size 8. To figure out the length of our ring, we will need to do some basic math. For the first step, we take our size 8 ring gauge and measure the inner dimension with our digital caliper. In my case, a size 8 ring has a diameter of 18.10 millimeter. I then divide 18.10 millimeter by 2 to obtain a radius of 9.05. I then added the thickness of my material. I used 1 millimeter square wire for the frame, giving me a total of 10.05 millimeter radius. I then multiply my radius of 10.05 millimeter by 2 to get a diameter of 20.1 millimeter. I then take 20.1 millimeter and multiply it by pi 3.14, giving me a final answer of 63.114 millimeters length. Here I have my 1 millimeter square wire already cut. When cutting miter ends, measure from the longest point. Filing a small V-groove on the side of your wire is a better approach. I used some scrap pieces of silver so I wouldn't have to mill an ingot and draw it through a drawing plate. To cut such a small wire, I used a miter jig. Projects like this is where the miter jig really comes in handy. Here I have the frame on a honeycomb soldering board secured with stainless steel wire that I bent into U-shapes. My pieces are clean and ready to be soldered at this point. Next, I applied the pieces of hard silver solder and flux. I'm using a liquid form, any flux will work. I switch between a liquid and a borax cone depending on the project. For filigree, I tend to favor liquid. Soldering the joints is a simple process. Since I don't have a large piece, I can heat each joint individually. After soldering, we'll then pickle and neutralize our frame and clean off any excess solder. Once the frame is clean and I am satisfied, I will fill half the frame with filigree wire. The wire that I am using here is 2 pieces of 0.25 millimeter silver wire twisted together and milled through a rolling mill to 0.30 millimeter. The zigzag wire is the same wire. In order to achieve the zigzag pattern, we used a homemade jig. I will make sure to leave a link to a video on how to make one. To solder the wire, I will use solder in a powder form as it is the easiest to work with for filigree. If you are new to soldering and want to give this ring a try, medium solder would be the best choice. If you have more experience, hard solder is a better option as it will leave your piece with a brighter finish due to the high silver content. For this project, a bigger flame is preferred. I would avoid using a pencil torch as it will concentrate too much heat in one area and melt right through our confidence. Make sure to pay very close attention when soldering. Always keep your flame moving to avoid potentially melting our filigree strand. After all, it is only 0.30 millimeters thick. After the solder flows, we can either quench our piece in water or let it air cool. I then pickle and neutralize my piece in baking soda and water. Using our fingers, we will push on the filigree to inspect our piece. If there is any loose part, we will then solder them after filling the other half with filigree. Here I mix my solder with a liquid flux and applied it by brushing it on. I then repeat the soldering process. To form the ring, we gently bend it over the ring mandrel with our hands and gently tap the top with a rawhide mallet. Here I lightly polish. This stage removes a small amount of metal, so I make sure not to apply too much pressure. Making this ring may seem difficult, but it's really not. You can save a lot of time by buying 30 gauge wire, which will be listed as 0.26 millimeter or 10,000ths of an inch. Thank you for watching. Make sure not to miss the video on how to make a zigzag jig.